Judge, it is not preferable to our team that the government must stop prioritizing stopping climate change just because there are economic concerns at hand. We believe this is just neither justified nor right, and the government should fulfill its duty for its citizens by promoting environmental issues over economic ones. Instead, the preparation side aims to prioritize environment over economy, fulfilling the needs of the public. By all means, should we try to stop the climate change, which cannot be fixed later on. I'll explain this concept later. Social contract isn't there just for nothing. So happy to propose. Moving on to my goal. So the perpetrators' goal in this debate is to firstly counter climate change by supporting environmentalists and will effectively alert other countries about the problem, and secondly try to teach children and adults about the growing change and how they should stop it. Moving on to my arguments, my first argument is about how we are justified to actually implement this policy and about the principle justification. So the mechanism of this argument is that climate change is one of the biggest problems we face in modern society, and when it comes to the government, we believe it should of course prioritize environmental costs, even if it comes to economic downfall. Our mechanism is twofold. Firstly, the government's obligation is to ensure its citizens have a safe and clean environment to live upon. Environmental costs have been severely affecting the daily lives of its citizens due to extreme weather and increasing temperatures. Thus, it is morally and principally unjustified that the government considers long-term effects of the economy when citizens are suffering. Companies have a chance to recover using the financial aid given by national organizations, but climate change is one thing that we will not be able to fix, and our side of the house believes thus we should prioritize environment over the economy. Second, let's talk about the effects that will happen if we implement what the opposition team is suggesting. The economic issue that could have been fixed will be fixed, but climate change will get worse until finally people start to rebel against the government that prioritizes economy over the environment. B, the government would have to deal with the aftermath of the climate change, which will be bigger than if they prioritize climate war. The government would have failed its purpose to aid its citizens. But how can it be different on our side? The government will prioritize the environment over the economy, soon fixing the global state of the environment, and will make a positive effect, effectively helping the citizens. The citizens also will help the government, and together they'll work to solve the climate issue. B, while there will be also economic issues, will be solved later by global organizations and will be able to solve the problem easily. See, another thing to note here in this debate is that we already spent a lot of work on climate change and we're continuously making progress. If the government stops here and tries to promote economy, then all of that would diminish. Thus, I'm so happy to propose. Moving on to my second argument, which is about the environmental urgency. The premise of this argument is that climate change and global warming is starting to get out of hand. The mechanism of the argument is that judge in the status quo, we have a world in which these environmental problems are even worse than before. Currently, it is only 6 years until we have to move on to another place on Earth. If we don't take any action in stopping these problems, like to what the opposition side is saying, our future from Earth being useless will be so close and there wouldn't be any solution to take. Thus, we're justified to actually say that implementing policy will help the climate and we should implement this policy. But however, the opposition side will keep saying that that promoting the economy will also further affect the environment, and the government will have too many problems at hand. However, this thing will be totally false. If the government actually tries to promote the economy more, as I stated before, the government would have too much things. The government would have too much aftermath to handle because of the climate change, and it will fail its citizens. And thus, so happy to propose. Thank you.
If we are only focusing on climate change and not the economy, people will be in danger. My team will explain why. But before I move on to my arguments, I will first rebut the previous speaker. They said that climate change is a very serious problem and is in need of immediate care. Well, our response to that is actually, no, we still have time and we don't need to fix it right now. We probably have more than a century left. We can use that time to develop undeveloped countries, and then we'll be able to be more effectively stop climate change. They also said that economy can be healed easily. Well, actually, no. It can leave a dent forever in the country. They also said that people will help each other. But no, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
POI, sir.
Yes?
Before you said that we have like over a century left to fix the environmental issues, but actually science shows that if we do not fix the issues right now, we will only have 6 years left. In 2030, we have to go to another planet.
Actually, but most countries are working hard to stop climate change, and that includes major countries like China, the United States, and even South Korea. Because they have very high tech, they will be able to decrease climate change by a significant amount in the next 5 years.
Why, sir?
Now I'll move back to my rebuttals.
Why?
Okay. When they said people will help each other, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says survival comes first, then moral, and then environment. So people will think of their survival first, then helping each other. And finally, they said climate change is getting worse and worse and worse. Well, our response to that is, well, yes, but you can fix it by growing technology and using it to solve the problems. Now I'll move on to my argument. Economic systems provide the resources and infrastructure necessary to adapt and mitigate climate change. If the economy is neglected, people may lack financial means to protect themselves from climate-related disasters like floods, wildfires, or hurricanes. A strong economy can fund disaster relief, build resistant infrastructure, and support communities facing the brunt of climate impact. Without this economic foundation, even the best climate policies may fall short of safeguarding vulnerable populations. Many communities depend on industries that are vulnerable to climate change.
Why?
Declined. For example, agriculture, tourism, and fishing industries. If the transition to a low-carbon economy is not managed carefully, people could lose their livelihoods, exacerbating poverty and inequality. Economic hardship can deepen social unrest, leading to instability that makes it harder to focus on long-term climate solutions. People in economically stressed regions may also be less likely to accept or support climate policies if they perceive them as a threat to their jobs or standard of living. For example, China. China is a very economically developed country. Before, at hard times, they were only focusing on their citizens. However, now they focus on the environment too. If China, at its hard times, did not think of its citizens, the country would not be as it is today. Moreover, if the countries did not think about the economy, it will lead to consequences. Now I'll move on to my second argument. Because there's too much climate change, stopping it would delay economic growth by 1,000 years or so. People have produced a significant amount of greenhouse gases and depleted more than half of the world's resources. This is a very large amount we're talking about. Redoing all this would stop countries in their tracks of economic growth. If you think of the affirmative of the world, climate change will not stop, but grow much, much more. For example, if you stop all economic growth and focus on the environment, once developed countries like Afghanistan need their natural resources and factories. Shutting these down would make citizens of Afghanistan die of poverty, unavailability of jobs, and no protection. Thank you.
Honorable Judge, the opposition side has a huge flaw on their side, and they failed to take this debate home. First, I'll move on to some clarifications against the previous opposition speaker to prove their stance is wrong. The opposition's main stance is basically that this amount of money should be given to important matters, but what they don't understand is that climate change and the fall of our environment is one of the most pressing issues in society, and basically that isn't really a long-term issue. It's very close to our current society. Moreover, they rebutted our POI rebuttal by saying that there are major countries that are trying to solve this and stop this economic problems, but environmental problems, but this doesn't make any sense, as it's their side which is saying they should stop these countries, which also rebuts their own rebuttal, which is it will take at least a century to wait for these environmental issues to become very serious. Now move on to my rebuttals. So they talked about how economic growth is very important to address social issues. So the opposition argues that economic growth is very important to funding education, healthcare, and stuff like that, which in turn supports society as a whole. However, without addressing climate change now, the cost of environmental damage will soon overwhelm any of the social gains either. So basically, infrastructure, healthcare, and these welfare systems will all face strain due to climate-related disasters and health impacts. And prioritizing climate action is necessary to ensure that all these social systems can continue functioning in the long term. True resilience requires a stable environment, which cannot be achieved without climate action. Next, they talked about how climate action will lead to economic disruption, and the opposition claims that transitioning to a sustainable industry will cause job losses, especially in sectors related to fossil fuels and which will harm families and communities. And while some jobs might be lost, prioritizing climate action again will also create new opportunities in renewable energy, green construction, and also agriculture. And investing in these sectors not only provides jobs but also builds a economy positions to the future. Job displacement can be mitigated with training and education programs, and while a lack of climate action will create mass unemployment and industry struggle with the damages of extreme weather and environmental degradation. Now moving on to my argument. Our argument, honorable judge, is completely invalid that the opposition side should leave this matter alone, since it's the government's role to keep their citizens from danger. By opposing the motion, the opposition side is preventing these governments from fulfilling their roles, which is both morally wrong and unjust. Judge, the government and the citizens are form of a social contract, as the citizens give tax towards the government, and in return, the government solves the problems and consequences that are happening in today's society. Yet the opposition side is diminishing this moral obligation of the government and the social contract between the government and their citizens. In the opposition side's best case scenario, they have a society where the pressing matters like helping the economy is solved, while the problem in sustaining our environment wasn't touched and is getting bigger or has already given a devastating effect towards the citizens, while our side's worst case scenario has solved one of the most pressing issues in the status quo, and government has fulfilled their moral obligation and other matters related to for example, to the economy and are also being solved. Judge, the key point here is that our side prevails even in the comparison between our worst case scenario and their best case scenario, since at least the government is not unjust. And why is this so important? Judge, like our honorable Prime Minister already stated in his speech, it's only a few years from now until we move to another place other than Earth. And the other side just wants to put their power on problems that aren't as important as environmental problems we told you today. Therefore, so proud to propose thank you.
Hello, indeed, actually, leader of opposition. And before I move on to my arguments, I'll first like what the previous speaker said. The previous speaker said that climate change is one of the most biggest problems, and that climate change is more important than anything else. Like our first speaker had said numerous times, actually climate change is not that important because we at least have like 10 years left, and 10 years, even though it might seem really close, it's actually a very long time. So you still have a lot of time to actually help. And if it's only like 1 day left of Earth, then maybe we should immediately take action. But it isn't that, so we don't actually need to save the Earth right now. And
You won, man.
No, it's not time yet. And the previous speaker also said that climate change, it can, like, other things cannot be achieved with that environmental action. You see, even though some big countries are doing environmental action right now, some countries aren't, and we're not really fully in environmental action and climate action. However, we still achieve a whole lot of things, which means that their point wasn't true. The previous speaker also said that climate action will make better jobs like agriculture. Actually, agriculture also affects a lot in climate change, since they use they also burn fossil fuels using those cars, and they also have an effect on climate change. The previous speaker also said that it's the government's job to help people, and opposition is actually blocking this. Actually, no, because if it's the government job to help people, they should do it by actually thinking about economy first. Because if there's no economy,
Ma'am.
yes.
I thought we already stated that yes, we know that the economic problem will be serious, but however, if you actually think about your world's problem about the climate change will be bigger than our world's problem about the economy, and our world has an alternative to fix that. However, you don't. How do you solve that?
When we actually develop economy and actually make the technology and develop our countries, people will, since they have a higher technology, they'll be able to solve the climate problem more faster and more better. Now moving on to my arguments. My argument is that the country needs to get a little bit developing the economy to start developing the environments. Now, when you're in hard times, you usually focus on trying to save your citizens and beat them. It's very unhuman when you don't think about the citizens' lives and how they will starve to death, or how they will have no heater or aircon, so they will either be super hot and die, or they will actually die from hypothermia. Now, like, I would like to prove this point using an example. Like, let's say China. China before was a poor country and now became very rich and it's very economically developed. Now, China, when they were in the hard times, they focused on saving their citizens and feeding them, not just trying to solve an environmental problem and not trying to solve the world. They still thought about the people who live there, because they don't think about the earth, and then there's no one to actually live there. What's the point of it? If there's like 10 years, and if there's like 1 year or 2 years left and it's very urgent, of course it should help. But we're not in that situation. We don't need to help right now. Now, let's say South Korea was also not that decline. Actually, South Korea was very poor, but now it's a little bit more stable than before. However, now we started to think about the environment, and we're actually one of the countries that actually really passionate about the environment. However, we did not think about the environment when we're in poor times, and we don't need to think about it, because it's very, very, very unhuman to think about think about the earth and like saving the earth when your people are dying and starving and losing their jobs and dying for hypothermia, which is more important, people's lives. Because if there's no people to live in the planet, there's no use trying to save it. That is why we should actually try to think about the economy first. Very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Topic technology, but about protecting workers, supporting communities, and creating a stable, balancing society. Let me show you why the government side stands for these principles and how they've proven that server limitations on automation are necessary for a fair and just economy. The opposition has argued that companies need the freedom to automate and improve efficiency for the sake of economic growth. Quickly, the automation boosts productivity, save costs, and helps companies stay competitive. But this argument ignores a major point: economic growth is only valuable if it benefits everyone, not just few big corporations. On our side, we believe that the government has a duty to protect its people, especially those most vulnerable to job loss. Though these workers are not just numbers, they are people with families, bills to pay, and communities to support. By slowing down the automation process, we give these individuals a fair chance to adopt retrain and transition to new jobs rather than being tossed aside for the sake of profit. The opposition keeps repeating that innovation is good, but they fail to recognize that not all innovation is positive for everyone. They seem to believe that all technology and automation are naturally beneficial, but when machines replace entire sectors of workers, such as cashiers, factory workers, and even some artisans, it leaves thousands of people without work and without options. To put it simply, economic growth should not come at the cost of job stability and human welfare. Our approach balances economic process with social responsibility, creates an economy where workers have a role and a future, rather than one dominated by corporation agreement. The opposition, our second clash is about the long-term versus the short-term impacts of automation on society. The opposition argues that in the long term, automation will create new jobs and improve society. Overall, they believe that the short term disruptions are worth it for the eventual benefits of a high tech economy. But this overlooks the instability. Imagine an entire community losing jobs overnight due to factory automation. The local economy will collapse, business will close, and families would be left in crisis. The opposition also talks a lot of economic growth, but they fail to understand that economic growth is not just about how much money companies take. It's about how this wealth is distributed and whether it benefits society as a whole. When companies automate jobs too quickly, they create a society drive by health. On our side, we prioritize a balance and economy by controlling the speed of automation. We ensure that economic growth benefits everyone, not just the rich. We give workers a stable income and help prevent the widening gap between the rich and the poor, creating a society where everyone has a fair chance. In conclusion, our team strongly believes that human dignity is the most important than any other technology things. Therefore, thank you for listening.
Madam Speaker, other side, and more slightly citizen today. By almost ending debate, I would like to ask you some questions. Madam Speaker, would you want to live in a world where everything is disappeared, everything is abolished, or in a world where everything you have to wait a little, but then everything is beholden by you? Now, I am the speaker of the opposition side, and I'll tell you why our side nominated. Now, starting with rules. The first speaker of government said that do not fix climate change later on. If you actually looked up into history, you know that humans adapt more, faster, and better when it's at crisis. Now, he also said that companies have a. He also said that the climate is more important than economy. No, maybe no. But firstly, if you want to solve the environment, you have to solve the countries which are developing countries. We cannot show these countries, not care about them, then they'll slowly disappear. And now, if you think about the environment first, nobody actually responded to this from the government side.
You lie.
Yes.
So are you voting your first speaker? Because I thought your first speaker, by responding to the PI, already stated that countries like China are helping solve the climate changes. A lot of countries are helping, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yes. So I'm not rebutting the first speaker. So firstly, if you want to solve the climate change, yes, we can slowly help like China, but we cannot drastically suddenly help everything. Then those developing countries will not be developing anymore and slowly disappear. Now, if the government side truly wants to stop climate change, then they must agree with the past multiple speakers that our side has stated before. If you do want to stop climate change, then you have to make all the developed countries develop and then do it, and it will take much more time. Now, the second speaker of government said that we should use money for bigger problems. I'm really sorry, but we never said anything like that. We only said that we have to use money for development.
You lie, ma'am.
No, that developing countries and then use it for the environment. He said that saving the environment will make more jobs. No, as our side said before, saving the environment won't make more jobs because then the development will get slower and slower, and there will be less more jobs. Now, I'll rebut the web speaker. Now, he said that there will be other jobs. Yes, but since there are other jobs, people will get those jobs, and more jobs will disappear. And the people who had the jobs will disappear. Now, he also said that we are
You lie, ma'am.
we are underestimating our tech and our technology. Now, even though we might be underestimating technology, then we are not, because if you are in climate change, if we are in climate change, then we are not underestimating it, because it is already cold or hot, and people will die because of it's cold or hot. And also, I have a question. How will you leave the world if there is climate change? Now, and for the clashes, it's also climate change, and nobody answered a question from the government side. So think about the citizens left. Would they want to think about the environment or themselves? Totally themselves. 80% will agree to not saving the environment. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, by almost ending this debate, I'd like to prove why our side has won. Now, by proving this, I'll first say what their main idea was. Their main idea was that the climate problem is very important and it's very serious right now. However, let's say that it is very, very serious. We cannot solve it. The economy is not fully developed because we don't have enough power and we don't have enough technology. We're not fully developed enough to actually help people and help climate change at the same time. Like our previous speakers had numerously said, climate change is not that close, and you still have time to develop and then fight the climate change. Now, our side's main point was that it's going to lead to very bad developing countries and that people are going to die. However, they only poorly engaged in this, saying that people will not die because of those problems. However, people are actually going to, because if they are forced to not use aircon or heaters because of maybe the climate change problem, they're not allowed to do this kind of stuff. Then what if it's very cold in the winter? Should they not use the heater? Then they will die of hypothermia. What if it's too hot for them? They will die because they were so dehydrated. People will have to use so much to do it. Now, we, however, engage with the other side's points that their main idea that the problem is very important and they should be solved right now. However, as our speaker that numerous said before, is not very, very close. We don't need to fight it right now. If it's like 10, maybe like 5 years from now, people are going to die and the whole world is going to vanish, maybe. However, our side engaged with this a whole lot of times, and therefore our side has proudly taken this debate. Proud to propose.
Judge, the whole concept the government team is trying to grasp upon, the whole concept the opposition team is trying to grasp upon is unbelievable. They try to compare the best case to our worst and make illogical rebuttals against their arguments. Thus, this shows how they cannot win this case. But our side give excellent 3 arguments explaining how there is an urgency of climate change, how we need help with it, and how economy is not important when we think about the climate change that will happen in 6 years. Now, moving on to my counter rebuttals. Firstly, they said that the climate change is not urgent. This is the most illogical and most outrageous rebuttal of all time. Their first speaker responded to this by saying that other countries are helping to the environment and more countries are trying to. It just agrees to us. This I'm so happy to oppose. They also said that people will have to suffer because we're trying to put the environmental policy in place. However, we do not say anything about trying to force people into not using their heaters or air conditioners. We only stated that the motion already dictates that we will tax these companies and we will actually help them try to make environmental products. So that was happy to propose. Moving on to my rebuttals, their first argument was about how economic growth is important to funding things, and their second argument was about how prioritizing the environment will affect people's lifestyle. These arguments are pretty similar to each other, so I broke them by both. They said that there will be people dying because of heat and air conditioning, but this is very unrealistic, and they're underestimating our technology, as we still have technology like fans. Our team's best case scenario is at least better than the opposition's best case scenario. Moving on to our extensions, our first argument is about how we're justified to actually implement this policy. Climate change is one of the biggest problems that we face in modern society, and this is why we actually need to face this urgency, and thus the government has an obligation to aid its people in this. We also talked about environmental urgency. They say that they have more time to prepare for this urgency, which doesn't make any sense, as we already told you, we have 6 years, and it takes a large amount of time for doing all these countries to act together and to influence every person. And the last argument is of how it is the government's moral obligation. They've never rebutted this argument at all. So how do we win? Judge, they didn't give any mechanisms to revolt us. Also, they're saying that 6 years isn't not close, and we already said that we will have other technology, and also them saying that we'll have centuries and more years is very unrealistic, and this is just completely invalid. Everybody, scientific studies are made about this, so that's how to oppose. Thank you.